Hello, once again, YouTube world. Literally, long time no see. It's been a couple of years since I posted. As I indicated in the comments on my last video on world building, real life interfered. Not to belabor point because it's not related to gaming at all, and that's what I'm really doing these videos about. But the very brief was my mother developed dementia, and I had to become a caregiver, and it got bad enough that I really didn't have time to do these videos. So things have changed dramatically. So I'm looking forward to being able to start doing these on a more regular basis once again. I'd like to start this video with a little bit of a rebuttal. Did get some feedback on my commentary about surprise in first edition AD&D, which was a politely worded but still basically, you idiot, it's the number of pips on the die. And with all due respect to that person, no, it's not. Not with what I'm talking about, which is rules as written. If you do number of pips on the die, it's your game. Knock yourself out. Everybody homebrewed rules for combat and surprise in this era of D&D. But rules as written. Look at, I would encourage you in particular, sir, look at page 62 of the Dungeon Master's Guide. And it is very clearly spelled out there that it is the difference between the pips rolled among the two parties. That is the number of segments lost, i.e. the amount of surprise. If I roll a 2, you roll a 5, it is 3 segments worth of surprise. And you also have to bear in mind the various permutations. Not everybody rolled surprise based on a 6-sided die. A Drow player character per Unearthed Arcana is surprised 1 in 8. Monks, going back to, again, first edition, Player's Handbook, have a percentage chance. At first level, they've got the same chance of 33 1/3 or 2 in 6 of being surprised. But then, as they increase in levels, it goes down. Well, how do you do that? You're dividing by roughly, converting it to sixes. So you're dividing a percentage chance by 16 and what is 2/3% chance, or 1 in 6. So you're converting it to that kind of a percentage system, and you've got it. This is why it was used for math an awful lot by high school teachers back in the 70s and 80s. Because of that conversion, you don't have the fractions as much. So at any rate, and you also had an average. You could then figure out more precisely, like if you've got a bugbear that surprises because of special circumstances, 4 and 6 as opposed to 3 and 6. Okay, well, what's the chance of the monk being surprised then, in terms of the die roll, and how many segments, therefore, are getting lost? So it's a little bit more clear, but again, because it was bad enough that they put the rules for combat spliced between the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide in first edition. They then came out with Unearthed Arcana and added more combat rules. So it was a dicey situation. I recommend anyone that wants to learn more. Dragon's Foot did an excellent breakdown, and they even give examples of each type of element of the combat. They footnote it all so that if you want to read it for yourself, you can go to that appropriate page in the Dungeon Master's Guide, Player's Handbook, Unearthed Arcana, whatever, and read it for yourself and then piece it all together. But they've done the work for you. So if you don't feel like doing an academic scholarly research on first edition rules as written combat, you can just take them at their word for it and adapt it. Now, that's all I got to say about the surprise. A little bit of a rebuttal and clarification that, once again, I'm talking about rules as written. I myself don't follow the rules as written. I've got too many modern school younger players for me to really, it's confusing as all heck when you're used to base attack bonus, and every 5 points of base attack bonus you get another attack each round, and so on and so forth. So and it's understandably confusing, and once again, I'm not belittling anyone. I'm not saying anything against it. This is just, it's like learning a new game system, really. It's like taking somebody that knows 5th edition D&D or Pathfinder or whatever, and then teaching them to play Rollmaster, which has an entirely different game engine, entirely different dynamic. You're used to, in 1st edition, 18, generally speaking, being the maximum, maybe a 19 on your attributes. Get a girdle of giant strength, something like that, then you've got a strength that's possibly going up to a 24, but that's a magic item, not innate to you. Even magic items that gave stat bumps, including artifacts, had written in limitations, maximum of 18. Once 3rd edition came out, you could start bumping your stats up, and the stat bump became an enhancement bonus to an attribute. And so suddenly it was possible for somebody to be walking around with a strength of 30 or more. And then you start playing Rollmaster, which is a percentile-based game system, and suddenly you could have a character with a strength of 100 because you rolled really well on your percentile die roll. And again, each level there's an opportunity to increase those stats even beyond 100. Depends, again, on the rules that are being used in Rollmaster. So I'm not saying anything against the modern players when it comes to for instance, initiative doesn't matter if somebody's got a multiple attack routine. A troll attacks 3 times per round. It doesn't matter what the initiative die reads when you're fighting a troll. If you're a 5th level character, even a fighter, that has 1 attack every round, if a troll attacks first, then the initiative die matters as to which one gets the next blow for the 2nd attack for the troll or the 1 attack for that fighter. And then the troll attacks last. So initiative rolls sometimes become tiebreakers rather than actual determinations of who gets to attack first. Because that can be a little confusing to people in terms of, we think in terms of old school, initiative is side-based. Whoever wins initiative gets to go first. Modern, initiative is your individual turn order in the round. And that's kind of a universal mechanic. So what do you mean the troll gets to attack before I did? I beat him on initiative. Yes, but you only have 1 attack per round. He's got 3. So he gets an attack before you get to make your attack. So it can be confusing. And I myself, I was trying to run it as much as possible with my current campaign, rules as written. And I fell back to my old ways, side-based initiative. When the troll's side comes up, he gets 3 attacks, boom, 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 and if I hit 3 times, then I'm rolling damage 3 times. And if the party won and they're all attacking 1 time per round, they still get their attacks in first. And if everybody gangs up on that troll and drops him, he didn't get a chance to do any attacks. So you play the game you want to play it. That's my philosophy. That's my credo. I'm running in a 1st edition game right now as a player, and the game master does things a little bit differently than I do. It's his game. It's totally his game. He just yesterday when we played, he set up an illusion which in 1st edition is very dangerous, because when you interact with it, you get to automatically make a will save to disbelieve it. No. If the illusion is described realistically enough that there is actually No reason for somebody to say, I disbelieve this. It's there. It's real to them. It can even kill them. The mind can just, okay, I'm shutting down. This is game over. I'm dead. And they don't get a saving throw to disbelieve that moment. If they have been believing it all along and playing as if it's actually there, they're dead. The illusory 100-foot pit, for instance. And he had a cave that looked like it was a portal to Avernus, the first layer of hell. We'd already been in mausoleums that had portals that took us to the abyss. So in game, we could completely believe this. And actually, I'll be honest, as a player, I was kind of thinking, oh, another portal. We're going on another little extra-dimensional jaunt. And I said in character, unless my eyes do deceive me, this is the first layer of hell called Avernus, because I'm running a cleric. And he took, unless my eyes do deceive me, as an expression that I was disbelieving the illusion, and therefore gave me a saving throw. Which I made, and so realized, no, it's just a regular cave. And what we see as Tiamat and her entourage approaching us was something much more harmless. It just, he let us off very easily in my book. It's certainly a lot easier than I would have were I the dungeon master. That's part of the fun of the game, is that, especially when you've got multiple dungeon masters in a group, everybody has their own approach, their own style. And so even though you're playing the same game, they're different games. So, surprise, you want to do pips, do pips. I don't care. My purpose with these videos is discussing the rules as they are written. I'm going to be getting out. I did the video last on world building, and I'll be moving more into my own personal thoughts. One thing that I will conclude this video, my return video, with my thoughts on what WotC did with OGL. I've had a lot of people asking me about that. Actually, I may be appearing on a podcast here soon, because the caster wants to know my take on it. Let me preface this by saying I have personally no dog in this game. I am not a publisher. I write crap like crazy, my own homebrew worlds and all this stuff, splat books. I don't publish any of it. I'm in this hobby for the enjoyment of it, because I enjoy playing it. I'm not trying to make a dime out of it. I've even had some people ask me to if I wanted to consider being a professional DM. I'm not saying anything against that, because I do believe that if somebody has a strong gift, and people flock to the games that they run, if they decide to start charging for it, go for it. I'm not against any new profession arising. And how do I justify this with a hobby? How many of you have gone to a gaming convention and basically paid to go play in a game? What is really the difference? Aside from a convention having the makeup, it's overhead in terms of renting the space for 10 to 12 hours a day for an entire weekend, paying speaker fees, so on and so forth. But that to one side. Okay, so instead of paying $40 to go sit in a 4-hour session at a gaming convention, what's the difference between somebody charging $5 per player for a 4-hour session at a game store? Especially since most game stores are now charging rent for the tables. I don't see any problem with that. And $5 for an individual player, that's nothing. You get a table of 6 people. That guy just got $30 for the 4 hours. And especially, like I say, if he's incredibly talented, if the guy can make Dwarven Forge quality 3D terrain tailored for the adventure module that he is running, and is great at painting miniatures, and just is able to provide a totally immersive experience using tech with projectors on the board, or to create like holograms or something like that, I'll pay money to play at that table. I don't know about you, but I would, because that would be a mind-blowing experience. So, that lengthy preamble to one side. I'm not a publisher. I don't work with any publishers. I don't get a dime off of this hobby. I'm looking at the principle behind the matter. In my opinion, WotC stepped in it in probably the most egregious way any company potentially could. I'm not going to say, oh, it's crippled the hobby. No. But I am going to say that they've destroyed trust. Granted, they walked it all back. And if, okay, we're not going to do OGL 2.0. Great. Too little, too late. They spent the last 22 odd years promising people, especially third-party publishers like Trollord, Frog God, Mongoose, all the third-party publishers that were using the OGL to create content and make money. And they basically threatened to throw that out all overnight when they spent the last 22 years promising it is sacrosanct, it will never be touched, we're not going to do anything. You can't take this back. You can promise again. You broke your promise once before, WotC. And I know some of the people in the third-party publishing, this would have bankrupted them. Because any change to the OGL means, in some cases, they've got to go back through 20-plus years of inventory to suddenly revise them or pull them off the internet shelves or whatever. And that's going to cost money. That's not a good business approach. So WotC's lost my support. I haven't really been interested in D&D as a game since 3.5, honestly. 4th edition, I looked at in absolute horror. And 5th edition, I played a couple of times, and no offense to anybody who's a 5e player. It's a fun game. I will grant, and that really is the sole criteria. Is it fun to play? For me, it's kind of like fantasy medieval superhero game. I could get a friend to run a DC Heroes game, or I guess it's called Blood of Heroes now, and just have it set in the Middle Ages, running like the Shining Knight or something like that, or Merlin, and I've got my medieval fantasy setting superhero role-playing game. I don't really need another one. So I don't really play 5th edition unless somebody really wants me to play in it and run it, but I'm not going to go out and get all of the books and everything else to play one character. I'll just create a character based on one book, and I'm borrowing books and so on and so forth. But other than that, I'm not. And after this, I'm not paying one more dime to WotC. That's just my principle. When you lose, they're going to have a very tough time rebuilding the trust in the gaming community. And the silliest part of this is they're supposedly protecting their IP. Well, first of all, game engines, that's really a debatable issue whether there's IP involved in a game engine. Because if you go back far enough, like Tunnels and Trolls, played a lot like D&D. They came out roughly, they were published at roughly the same time. D&D beat Tunnels and Trolls, a little bit, but obviously they were in development at the same time. So the game engine itself, that's really gray area, legally speaking, in terms of copyright law. I don't think they've got much ground to stand on with that. And then on top of that, there were so many things that expanded, that they were able to expand their own product line, by the way, with the OGL. All the third-party publishers that just blossomed creating D&D content caused more people, by the way, to go and buy the D&D game because they wanted to have the rules that this adventure was written for. Their Judges Guild did a lot of cross-pollination in the early days like that, too. They would put the stats up in their modules they put out for basic D&D, for advanced D&D, and for Tunnels and Trolls. And so there was a certain amount of cross-pollination, and Judges Guild saw an increase, helped increase sales both for TSR and for Tunnels and Trolls. OGL allowed WotC to come up with a Star Wars role-playing game based on their D20 system. There was a D20 Modern. There was a D20 version of Deadlands. There was a D20 version of Firefly, I think it was. D20 version of Babylon 5. So all of these other publishers published under OGL a D20 version of their genre games. And all of them were basically, for the most part, splat books. So you actually had, if you wanted to fully delve into it, get one of the WotC products. So you could get the rules and see where they've been refined and niggled. So I think it was a catastrophically bad business decision for WotC / Hasbro. And one has to wonder, since Hasbro acquired WotC, how much they've even attempted to learn their core market audience. WotC knows. That I'm comfortable with. But when Hasbro first acquired them, that's when 4th edition came out. WotC knew, or Hasbro knew video games, and so they had a new edition of Dungeons and Dragons that basically characters like video game characters. And every D&Der that I know personally went, no. So I'm not sure how much Hasbro knows their target market when it comes to tabletop role-playing games. And my feelings are so strong that, even though it may be the first and possibly only D&D movie that was worth the time to watch, because I know Hasbro invested in the movie, I'm not giving them a dime. I will wait until the movie has had its first run, and then I'll look for some site where I can watch it for free, or borrow it from somebody who's already bought the movie. But a couple of people have said, well, it's not Hasbro that's going to lose any money, it's the Irish company. I work in the film industry, folks. I am a producer. If that movie loses money, Hasbro loses money. That's why they're called an investor. Production companies might sink money into a movie, but for the most part, production companies do one thing: produce a movie. Whether it makes money or not depends on what their contracts say. Now, I don't know of a single production company that doesn't have back end for itself on a movie it makes. But it is theoretically possible that all they're doing is making movies. They collect their fee, go on and make the next movie, collect their fee, and they don't care whether it makes money or not. But the critical point here is it's not just going to be the Irish company, if it loses money, that's going to be suffering. Hasbro is going to lose money if the movie loses money. I'm not trying to cripple them. I'm just not going to support them. If it makes money, and I hope it does make money, because that means maybe another D&D movie will be made that's initial reports are pretty good. So as good, if not better, than this one, Honor Among Thieves. But I'm going to wait a while before I see it. So I think I'm going to veer away a little bit in my next video from D&D, unless I get some feedback and comments asking me some questions to expand more on something or other elements. I think I might start talking about some of the other, because the 80s was such a phenomenal explosion in role-playing games. And then another one in 2000 because, as I said, OGL. But not just the D20 stuff. There were other games that just came out that are pretty good. So I might just simply start with on my next video talking about another RPG, like, you know, maybe the D6 Star Wars or the evolution of Star Trek role-playing games, because, of course, FASA had one in the early 80s that was overall pretty good. It had some points that were completely unaddressed in the rules that anybody that's watched even just the 3 seasons of the original series knows, well, what if Spock does this, like he did in this episode? I don't have any rules in front of me. I got to kind of wing it. So unless I hear some feedback from other people with specific questions, that's going to be it for me tonight. And happy gaming. May all your hits be crits, and I'll see you on the next one.